think we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for coming. Hope lunch was good. Just want to introduce myself. My name's Dave Chung. I'm from Morningstar in Chicago, and so thanks to you guys for spending some time this afternoon with me, and thanks to Steve for putting together this agenda. It's always twisting my arm to come out to Southern California in November from Chicago, but I'll make the sacrifice to be here since it was 9 degrees in Chicago this morning. But we're going to talk a little bit about producing a all-day webcast. And even though the title of this presentation says how to, it's not really necessarily like a step-by-step, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It's more of a case study. So I'm going to talk about a webcast that we do every year, kind of go through the decisions we make in pre-production, the vendors we use, the workflow, everything, and hopefully you can grab a few tidbits from that to take into your productions. So just to get started, as I said, I'm from Morningstar. Here's how you can get a hold of me if you have any follow-up questions or if you need a copy of the slides, whatever it might be. How many of you have heard of Morningstar or know what Morningstar is? So Steve does, that's good. So Morningstar, we've been around for about 30 years, and I like to describe us as consumer reports for investing. And basically what that means is we have data and analysis on hundreds of thousands of investment vehicles. So these could be mutual funds, stocks, exchange-traded funds, closed-end funds, bonds, other credit instruments. And we serve essentially 3 main audiences. So we serve individual investors, so folks like you and me, maybe we're saving for retirement or for our kids' college education. We also serve financial advisors, so if you work with an advisor, most likely they're probably subscribing to our data and our services through some of our software platforms. And then we also service institutions. So these are the money managers themselves, so mutual fund companies, large endowments, that sort of thing. And Morningstar.com is our individual investor platform. So that's our primary retail website where folks like you and me can go, get information on different investment types, help put together a portfolio, keep track of those investments over time. And that's what I work on. Just a little bit about .com. We do about 3 million monthly uniques. Most of the editorial content or thought leadership content, the stuff that I work on, is free, so you don't have to pay for that. But we do have a premium service for our enhanced data, our analyst research, that sort of thing. We have about 120,000 premium subscribers. We produce anywhere from 800 to 1,000 videos a year. These are usually like short 3 to 5 minute web videos like you might be used to with all of our experts and analysts on camera. We do anywhere from 400 to 600,000 monthly video views just on our site, and our content gets syndicated out to a number of providers where it reaches much more than that. And we have a small 3-person video team that produces all of that. But the event that I want to talk about today is our Individual Investor Conference. So this is a online live streaming conference. In 2014, this happened back in March, and that was our 3rd annual, so we'll have our 4th one coming up this March. And essentially it's an all-day webcast. We do about 6.5 hours of live streaming content from our studios on a Saturday. We do it on a Saturday just because our audience are individuals, right? And so rather than take up their workday and watch it at work or try to figure that out, we do it on a Saturday, and we promote it heavily ahead of time so people can carve out the time. It's usually a mix of internal and external experts, so we have over 100 analysts on staff at Morningstar, specialists in different areas, and so we'll bring them on in different panels and discussions. And then we'll also bring in external experts to fill holes where we might not have the in-house expertise, say in Social Security or in healthcare, things like that. And then the webcast also includes a lot of interactive features that you would expect from an interactive webcast, right? So we've got ways where you can submit questions directly to the speakers, a live chat module so you can interact with other viewers, and that way we can interact with you as well. So we're going to go through essentially all the processes and the steps that we go through in pre-production, production, and not necessarily post-production, but at least the post-event processes. So starting with pre-production, we'll talk a little bit about how to craft an agenda that works well online. I'll talk a little bit about vendor selection. Who are you going to work with to get this done? The user experience, both before the event, during the event, and after. Signal flow, in terms of coming up with how you're actually going to produce this, how you're going to get an image from your camera onto a user's device somewhere in the world, and then testing. So starting with the agenda, I like to say you want to be a part of the discussion. So for example, I'm fortunate enough to work with lots of really talented editors and writers that are specialists in whatever field that they're presenting on. And so they can help obviously craft the agenda. But for me as the producer, or for you as a producer, you definitely want to be in those discussions early on, because that'll help you not only lend your expertise in terms of what works well on video and what doesn't, but also maybe help you guide the agenda in a way that will work well from a production standpoint. So for example, they might come up with an idea that, we should have 12 panelists and we should bring somebody in via Skype and then also have some slides, and you might say, let's tone it down a little bit, right? Like that might be a little too much for this 1 hour session. But being a part of that discussion up front will certainly help you in the long run. I also like to do that because I can help build in breaks for my crew. Since we're streaming for 6 to 7 hours, I want to make sure that we have time built into the agenda where we can switch positions if needed, people can take a break, they can use the restroom, get lunch, that sort of thing. And if you are not part of that discussion, then you could essentially have to work through the entire webcast and make it really difficult to produce. And I also say, here's where you want to leverage pre-recorded content. So during those breaks, you could show promos for the upcoming session. You could show educational content that's already been recorded. You can do lots of different things in those breaks to keep the viewer engaged, but allow you and your crew and everybody involved behind the scenes to take a little bit of a breather. And then at the same time, it's part of the agenda. You can help influence the session format, right? So if it's all panel discussions or if it's all single presentations like this, it can kind of wear on the viewer over time. So, for example, one thing that we did for the sessions that were single presenter like this is when it came time to do Q&A at the end, we would have our host essentially come back out on stage and facilitate the Q&A, right? So that the presenter didn't have to do that as well as presenting, because that can be a lot for somebody to take on. So that helped vary the format within a single session. It also allows you to have a mix of, like I said, panel discussions, presentations, pre-recorded content. For our lunch session, since we went from 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m., there was a break there for lunch from 12 to 1, and this is online, right? Like we're not providing lunch for these people, obviously. But what we did do is we had kind of a little halftime break where we had two of our editors get on camera and basically recap the morning, talk about what stood out to them, kind of highlights from the morning, and then kind of tease what they were excited about for the afternoon. That was really successful in that viewers were able to help digest the things that they just watched, they just experienced, and then also get them excited about for what was to come so that they would stick around even longer. And then for the second half of the lunch, we actually showed like a 22-minute long-form documentary-style feature that we produced that went into some of the details of what was coming up in the following session. So it really kind of teased out a lot of what they were going to experience in the afternoon. So when it comes to vendor selection, you're definitely going to need to work with somebody, right, in order to get this done. You can definitely do it on your own. You just have to decide if that's something that you want to take on or if you want to outsource this part of it. So there's a lot of questions to think about. There's certainly a lot of vendors out there. There's an entire exhibit hall full of people that I'm sure are more than happy to help you. But it's important to ask yourself and to ask these vendors different questions, right? So you can look at the free options. There's certainly a lot of free options for live streaming. YouTube Live is one of them. But is that the experience that you want for your users? Is that the experience that you want for yourself when you're producing? You can jump down to this last question, what about support, right? If you're using YouTube and something doesn't work, who are you going to call, right? Google's not going to answer the phone. So it's just something to think about. You have to ask, what are you getting for the money compared to what you could do on your own? It's not that difficult to go straight to a CDN, negotiate cheap bandwidth, set up an ingest point, stream to it, embed a player on a page, and call it a day. So what are the features and enhancements are you getting from the vendor that you can't build yourself? And certainly you could build things all day long on your own, but is that something that you really want to spend your time doing? Or do you want to outsource that part and just worry about the production? So in this case, I've got two screenshots here of vendors that we used. The first one is a company called VenStream. They used to be called the Webcast Group. And it's a small company out of Ohio. And essentially they have created a self-service webcast platform that works really well for us. It's relatively inexpensive. And it has the features that we need that, sure, we could probably build them ourselves. But they're already there, and they already are tested and working well. And they have support. So that's something that I didn't necessarily want to have to take on myself if I built it. So now I have somebody to call if something breaks. And then the other vendor here is Scribble Live. We use them for live chat on our page. There's a lot of live chat apps out there. You know, if you want to do it on the cheap, you could even just embed like a Twitter widget or something like that. But in our case, we wanted to have moderation control. We wanted to be able to pin certain items at the top of the chat, just have more interactivity. So we went with Scribble Live for that. So let's talk a little bit about the user experience, both before the event and during. So we built a small mini site promoting the conference. You know, if you were coming to Streaming Media West, you likely went to the mini site that they had, right? That had the agenda, info on the speakers, that sort of thing. So just like you would go to an in-person event, we do that online as well. So we've got, you know, a little trailer, teaser video for what you could expect, information on the speakers, you know, the full agenda, full bios on the speakers, and you know, you can sign up right there and register for the event. Now, this whole experience we built in-house, and you could certainly do that as well, or you could leverage your vendor if you're using one for that. And then we just link off to the vendor's registration page. So the nice part about this is if we decide to change vendors, we just change the link, and we still have our microsite that we can reuse every year and just update with new content. As far as the day of webcast page, this is what it looked like. And you can see you've got your video player. You have, let's see, you've got a little module here for asking a question. We have sponsorship banners, both up here, and a content module sponsorship here. And then this is the Scribble Live widget where we do live chat and where we can interact with viewers. And it looks pretty similar on the iPad, which is nice that all that interactivity kind of maintains on the tablet as well. If you're using a smartphone, you just get the video. You don't really get all the interactive elements. So that's a little bit on the user experience. I want to talk now about signal flow. And this is where it might get a little bit more technical, where we talk about some of the equipment that we use and how we patched it all together. But I like to just whiteboard it out, you know, a few weeks ahead of time, so I know all the gear that I need if I have it all in-house or if I need to rent something. So I'll just walk through this. I won't go through every detail on here, but this is probably hard to see, so I'll just explain it. But essentially, you've got these three large rectangles here are all switchers. And it might be a little overkill, but I tend to worry about things breaking. So I build in lots of redundancy whenever possible. So right here, our primary switcher is a TriCaster 455. And this was the first time that I used a TriCaster for an event this long. And so I was a little worried that, well, what if it crashes? What if it just stops working? If I have to reboot it, whatever it might be. So just upstream from the TriCaster, I had a more traditional Panasonic HS400 switcher. So all of our cameras here fed into that switcher, and then they looped out straight into the TriCaster. This gave me the flexibility that if the TriCaster went down, I could just switch to the other camera cut from the Panasonic. I would lose lower thirds and graphics that are doing in the TriCaster, but at least I would still have a way to switch cameras. And then the third switcher over here is essentially just a small Blackmagic television studio switcher. And I like to call that my stream switcher. So this is the last switch before the stream, or before the encoder. This allows me to switch from primary switcher to backup switcher. It allows me to dump off to a technical difficulties slide. You know, if everything over here just exploded, I could still put up a slide that said, hey, we're having problems, give me a minute. It's nice to build in safeguards like that so that if things break or if you have problems, you can communicate with the viewer and let them know that you're aware of the situation. It's not their problem, it's your problem, and you're working on it. And then the feed from there essentially goes into our Mac that's running Wirecast and encoding off to our destination point. The only other thing I'll mention on here is audio. So we're running a Yamaha LS9 digital mixing console. All of our mics and inputs go into that. But the key piece here is I absolutely love this piece of gear. It's a Dan Dugan auto mixer card that you can get for the Yamaha. They also have an outboard piece of gear for this. And essentially, it's the perfect piece of equipment when you have a panel discussion, when you have like 4 to 6 microphones up in. If you've ever had to mix that manually, it can be difficult because you're trying to match when someone's talking to your faders and that sort of thing. And so this kind of does that automatically for you. They use it on presidential debates when you never know who's going to talk next. And it's just fantastic. So that's the Dan Dugan auto mixer. I'm a big proponent of that piece of gear. So here's some gear shots because I love gear. Our cameras were Canon C100s. Canon is just like absolutely killing it with the Cinema series. If you guys haven't used these cameras, they're amazing. The C100 is like $4,500, and you can attach whatever EF mount lenses you want to. In this case, it's 70 to 200. We're taking the HDMI out of the camera into a HDMI to SDI converter to get into our switcher, and it's just beautiful, the image that you get out of it. Over here, you can see our rack where we've got the LS9 up here, our Panasonic switcher, and then our TriCaster, and then our Mac that's recording. Here's a look at the studio and the control room during the webcast. You can see we've got the studio behind the glass here where the panelists are talking. And I like to set up my signal flow kind of in order, like physically as well. So you can see over here, actually even left of that is a Panasonic switcher and a multi-view display of that. Then we go into the TriCaster. Out of the TriCaster, it comes into our stream switcher right here where you can see the multi-view of that. And out of that goes into Wirecast right here. And that streams out to the servers. And then this PC on the end is essentially viewing the live stream as if I were at home. So I can see instantly, like, if picture goes out here, I know that the problem is between these two systems, right? It's nice to just lay it out like that so that if you do run into issues, you can instantly kind of pinpoint where the issue is happening. So now talking about testing, you probably heard this if you've ever done any kind of live event or read up on how to do it, like you can't test enough, right? And so, I like to start testing the stream as soon as your vendor will let you. So that could be months before the event. You want to just see, can I get a test stream from where I'm going to be to the destination, and can I watch it on different devices? You want to think about the length of your event. So in our case, 7 hours. I tested for 7 or 8 hours, right? Like I would just start the stream in the morning, check on it throughout the day, make sure there are no drop frames, and sync was still good all throughout. And then you want to do it like at similar time of day as what you're going to be doing on the day of your event. And then signal flow testing, I like to do this at least one day before the event. So if you can, you definitely want to set up the day prior. I do this because if I need to pull an all-nighter, I'm more than willing to do it. But if I come in at 9 a.m. and my stream starts at 12, that's cutting it pretty close. So I definitely suggest if you're doing a bigger production like this, try to get into the room, try to get your gear sorted out at least the day before. And then run tech and talent rehearsals as well, right? So you want to be in communication with your crew. You want to go over transitions, how they're going to work. And same goes for the talent, right? So the folks on camera, how are they going to set up the sessions? Are there any housekeeping notes that they need to say? How are they going to transition that to the break? How do you come back out of the break? That sort of thing. So as much rehearsal as you can do, both with your crew and with the talent, is definitely important. And now when it comes to production, you definitely want to keep calm, right? And follow the plan. Because you've spent months of pre-production coming up with this plan. Panicking when something goes wrong in production can certainly throw things for, you definitely don't want to go down that route. So the whole point of all that pre-production is so that everything after that goes smoothly. So in production, I like to follow a show flow. If you've never seen one, you can download a template. it allows you to follow by time of day every action that's going to happen on screen and how you communicate that with your crew. For me, as kind of the producer, I like to just float. I don't essentially assign myself a specific task or assigned job on the day of the shoot. I like to float around so I can either relieve somebody if they need a break. I can just kind of jump in and do that role for a little bit. I can check on the stream here. I can see how different folks are doing. I can act as a stage manager at times, but it's good to have at least one person that can kind of float from role to role. And throughout the show, you want to engage with the interactive features. So we were fortunate enough to have a few people that were dedicated to the live chat module to moderate it in case there were language problems or anything like that, to engage with viewers right there, ask questions, put out poll questions, kind of pin notices at the top of that chat module to say, the next session's coming up in 5 minutes, be sure to stay tuned, or replays will be available. Whenever you see like lots of frequently asked questions, you can kind of pull those out and answer them right there. And you want to be communicating with the viewers both through the live chat and on screen. So your hosts or your moderators can acknowledge the viewers when they send in a question, say, Susie from Boise asked this question, thanks so much for sending it over. Let's see what the panelists think about it. And you want to stay in communication with them throughout the day. So as I mentioned before, creating pre-recorded content or interstitial content between sessions is great, but it's also good to have title cards or slides that say the next session will begin at 1 p.m. and even have a countdown timer or something like that, so that people are less willing to then just bail. They know like what's coming up next, and you can even tease that at the end of the previous session, so that people will stick around. And then I would say don't get too hung up on the analytics, like the real-time analytics. So it's important to look at those and see like, okay, how many viewers do I have? What's going on with the live chat, these things. But I wouldn't like just stare at the data that's coming in, even though it's interesting to say, oh, we've got like 5,000 people watching right now. You can definitely kind of fall into this trap of looking at it too often. But I would say, obviously, if you notice a problem, if it goes from 5,000 to 100, maybe there's an issue, right? And that's something to investigate. And then just know that issues are going to come up. In the case of our event, at one point, we lost a picture on the stream switcher. And fortunately, it happened during the break, but as soon as it happened, I knew, because of the way I set up the signal flow, where it was happening, and I had to reseat an HDMI cable, and it came back. So, you just have to know that issues will happen. Things are going to go wrong. But as long as you do have a plan and you have all of your bases covered, you should be in good shape. So here's just some production stills. These are pretty dark, so it might be hard to see here, but this is my colleague Scott Halver calling the show and directing and live switching from the TriCaster. Here's another shot of the control room in the studio. Here's a shot in studio, again with the C100 that we're shooting with. There's a few more. And then, like I mentioned, we also had a few kind of presentation style sessions where it was just a single person on camera, and we would cut to slides and do split screen, that sort of thing. And then we also had like a green room or a ready room for speakers, and also our other editors that were doing the live chat and moderating the questions. And we sent a program feed out to that room down the hall. And this was obviously helpful for them to have their own space, but it was good to have it separate from our control room because there's obviously a lot happening in there. There's a lot of sound bouncing around. If there's too many people in there, a lot of talking, it can be distracting. So whenever possible, I like to send a program feed out to another room where people are getting their makeup done, kind of having casual conversations, and maybe you're doing some of this Q&A moderation, that sort of thing. So here's just a quick little sample, just like 90 seconds of one of the sessions, just so you can see kind of what the production looked like.
So on the negative side, I think the point that we were talking about the long-term fiscal situation in the U.S., we're just not facing these issues. We have to face these issues, and they are going to continue to be a drag on us because we have to deal with that. and that will continue to have uncertainty for both for individual consumers as well as for corporations, because they won't know what the structure and level of taxes are going to look like to deal with this. And so I think that's an uncertainty that really needs to be dealt with. On the positive side, I agree on the energy piece is something that's very good for the U.S. And I think that's one piece of it. And in the short run, I think the strength of the corporate balance sheets is something that is very important. We've seen some improvement in household balance sheets. There's still a lot more way to go, but corporate balance sheets are in a very good position. And so if we can turn the corner, deal with some of these uncertainty issues, and we've mentioned a lot of them, get both corporations and individuals to be more optimistic, we'll see more people come into the labor market, we will see more production, we will see more wage growth, and we can come back. But we've got these clouds that are out there. The crystal ball is cloudy.
Yeah, corporations have gotten lean and mean, and they've gotten a lot of cash, so it's a matter of being able to try to deploy some of that out.
Right, they can do it fairly quickly, but they need to have the reason to do it. When you have these clouds of fiscal and other uncertainties out there, they're unlikely to move ahead with lightning speed.
Cool. So you could, just to point out, like, the audio there, nobody's touching the mixer. Like, it's just wide open, right? And the Dugan is auto mixing. You know, as soon as our moderator jumped in with that follow-up, like, it switched the gain to his mic automatically and then switched back to Randy as soon as he answered the next question. So it helps reduce your crew count too. No offense to A1 audio mixers, but this kind of can replace that role if necessary. So post-event. So I say this, post-event ease comes from that pre-production planning. I can't stress enough just how important the pre-production is. And so when it comes to analytics, for example, post the event, the first year we did this, we relied solely on the vendor's analytics. And we're like, okay, they got that. We'll look at that when we get them. And it turned out that they didn't quite reveal everything we were hoping it would, and they just weren't, it didn't give us a clear picture on what actually happened on the day up. So, we planned ahead the next year to implement more robust analytics and to have multiple sets so that we could kind of compare and contrast and get a much clearer picture of what actually happened during the event. Same goes for replays. You definitely want to have a plan ahead of the event of what you're going to do with the replay. Are you going to make it available immediately after? Are you going to wait a while? Whatever it might be. In our case, we made the decision to wait a week, and that was nice because it gave us a week to prep those replays. And then we essentially relaunched the event and released one session a day for a whole week. So that gave it extra exposure on our site. And then it's good to just do like a post-mortem on the whole project. Sit down with everybody involved, talk about what went right, what didn't go well, and how you can improve for next time. And that's easy to do, obviously, for us since it's all in-house. If you're working with a client, you just want to schedule that in, right? And I'm sure they would appreciate it too, and that will help the next event that comes along. So here's some stats from our event. We had 5,800 registrations, about 2,800 live viewers. The average time spent was over 4 hours. And 82% of these attendees watched 3 to 6 hours, and a full 31% watched the entire thing, which I just thought was incredible considering we're streaming for 6.5 hours. The thing I'll say, when it comes to online video, like the numbers can be hard to see in context, right? Because you see oh, Taylor Swift has 250 million views on YouTube, and I had 2,800 views or something, right? It doesn't look that impressive, at least when I look at it. But then I have to compare it to real life, right? So, we do an in-person conference every year at the big McCormick Place in Chicago. It's one of the largest convention centers. We have 2,200 financial advisors come in. It costs a lot of money to put this thing on, and it's a huge event. And you're standing there in the keynote session with 2,300 advisors and big name speakers, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then I look at this and it's like, oh, we did 2,800. So imagine all of those people watching it, in the same place, and then the numbers start to feel a little bit better, and it makes sense to kind of see things in context that way. I think with online video it can be hard because, you look at YouTube numbers or you look at, like what the Super Bowl did or something, and of course you're not going to get there, but you just have to remember who your audience is and compare it to some kind of baseline. So conclusions, I would say, like I've said throughout this whole presentation, that you can't do enough pre-production, right? It's just incredibly important to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before before the day of, and that will just make the day go that much smoother, and everything that happens after that go much smoother. I'd also say, the key to keeping viewers on for 4+ hours is to engage and communicate with them throughout the event. So you can't just let a session end and then just hope they're going to stay for the break and come back. You have to tease what's coming up next, show something during the interstitial or during the break, and just keep in constant communication with them, whether it be through the live stream or through the live chat, whatever sort of medium you have available. And then the last thing I'll say is that content is still king. It doesn't matter, if you do all of those things and the content is not very good, they're just not going to watch. We're fortunate enough to have amazing writers, editors, analysts, experts in this field, and the content is really valuable. So I would say for you and for me as the producer, when working with somebody like that, it's really just our job to make things go smoothly and to kind of get out of the way a little bit and just let the content speak for itself. Because that's really what's going to get people to stick around for that 4+ hours on a Saturday during March Madness, right? So, with that, any questions? Sure.
So I saw that you were using the TriCaster 850 pod, and you were using the Wirecast as your streaming solution.
Mm-hmm.
Were you using the TriCaster as a backup of RTMP stream at that point, or were you only streaming single source? Also, I think I saw Paradeck on your whiteboard drawing as well. So.
Yeah, I can walk through that real quick. So we used, so I didn't use the streaming capabilities in the TriCaster at all. Part of that is just my own fear that stressing the TriCaster too much would break it, right? I've gotten much more comfortable with it now. There we go. And I might try that, but Wirecast is easy, it's cheap, it just runs on a computer. And for me, I've used Wirecast for a lot of events and never had a problem with it. So I trusted that in this situation. The TriCaster was recording internally, so I was recording a program feed as well as the wide shot camera. I didn't ISO record all of our cameras, just the program and one camera, so that if I needed to edit, I'd have some flexibility there. And then the Teranex, which is down here, was really just to convert our PowerPoint input to SDI so it could come into the switcher as SDI video. Yeah.
Have you had any experience on the solutions?
I haven't necessarily, just because I've always been in a studio environment. We do all these events from our headquarters, and we've got plenty of bandwidth and multiple connections. So I haven't needed to do a bonded cellular solution.
Talk about camera selection a little bit. You mentioned the HDMI issue you had. There's an SDI one on there, but you also have C100s.
Right. So we had 3 C100s, and as you know, the C100 only has HDMI out. The C300 has SDI, but it's 3 times the cost. So, we just went with the C100. So we take the HDMI out just using a shorty HDMI cable into HDMI to SDI converter, and that way we can then go SDI after that. This 4th camera you see here is SDI because that was a Panasonic HPX 170 that we just used as a studio cam. So we have it if you ever watch broadcast news or something, you have this studio shot that shows the lights and kind of the behind the scenes. Occasionally we'll cut to that, as you're kind of coming in or coming out of a session, just to kind of reveal that oh, this is happening in real time, it's live, stuff's going on. But otherwise, all of our our primary cameras were C100s. Yeah, we were at f4. So we had that 70 to 200, that was an f4. And then the other lenses were, I think they're 27 to 105s, also f4. 24, yep, to 105. And so yeah, they're all f4. So we're what?
Part of your consideration was to shoot in f4?
Well, that's as wide open as the lens would go. So that was part of the consideration in that, given available light, right? So I think we were at maybe 1,000 ISO, maybe had to go to 1,600, I'm not sure. But, given the exposure that we could get at the f4, that's what we went with. And we were going for that shallow depth of field. We didn't want to overdo it, because shooting live, if his eye's in focus but the nose out of focus, it's hard to get focus that tight. But in our situation, our guys could focus pretty closely, and generally their whole body would still be in focus, but it would just be that background that's out of focus. And you did, I would say, on this shot here, you can see. So we've got this Marshall 7-inch monitor up here, and this isn't the framing of the shot. So we put that into a pixel for pixel display so that you can really check focus easily. And then, the actual on-camera LCD is showing the framing. So that's a nice way. This was our close-up shot of the panelists, so that's why we gave that extra attention with the external monitor.
You mentioned that controlling your own analytics was something that you changed like immediately from first year to second year. Is there anything else from like first year to second or third year?
Yeah.
You found that immediately stood out that you knew you had that change or something that worked really well that you knew you had to spend on that on?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest one, the first year, it was our first year doing any kind of live streaming conference. And so, I come from a company that's done lots of in-person conferences, and we're like, oh, let's have a live audience, because it's essentially taking an event like this and then also streaming it. Well, that was difficult to pull off because you just need a lot more people to not only wrangle the live audience, but to cue the live broadcast. So it's all this smooth sort of transition. We had to bring in food for the attendees. They had to worry about where they're going to park and where they put their coats. All these things, right, that you don't have to really worry about with an online audience. And then when you look at the numbers, we had maybe 100 folks in the office live, and we had 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 watching online. It's why are we putting all this effort and energy into these 100 people, which they're certainly valuable customers and viewers, when the much larger audience is online. So that was something that we changed immediately after the first year. What else? The analytics was the other one. We brought in extra analytics, multiple packages so that we could kind of compare and contrast. And then the other big one that we changed was the first year we had 2 tracks. So we had 2 rooms going, and you could pick one room or the other. And it just was added way too much complexity, right? And I would say, given the relatively small size of the audience, I would much rather just have a very highly curated single track for this audience. And if that means that we do another conference where we want to focus on a different track, then let's just do that versus trying to coordinate 2 rooms, 2 streams, and then the interactivity too on the front end of having the user being able to pick which stream they're watching. It's just too much. For us, it was too much. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but that's again where being in the room when you're coming up with the agenda is important, right? Because if they come to you later and they're like, oh yeah, we've got this great agenda, we've had all these speakers come in, there's gonna be 2 tracks, we're gonna have 2 rooms, and you're like, oh, that just doubled our cost and quadrupled the complexity. It's a lot to handle.
Did this take place at your live conference, or is this just an add-on thing that you do?
This is an add-on, so it's its own conference, essentially. So we have a whole events team that produces probably a dozen to 18 different conferences around the world every year, and this is one of them. The big conference I was talking about at McCormick Place is probably our flagship conference that a lot of folks go to, but this one is geared specifically towards individuals, folks like you and me that are just investing on their own, and it's free. So a little plug for the conference if you want to check it out. It's in March, and you can watch it live or you can watch it on demand afterwards. Yeah. Sure. So at the time of this, in March, we were just a 2-person crew in-house. We added somebody this summer. So there was the 2 of us, myself, and then my colleague Scott, who essentially called the show and directed from the TriCaster seat. And then we brought in freelancers to run camera. So we had 2 freelancers running cameras, and then I had another contractor running audio. So even though I will say that the Dan Dugan does a lot, it was just good to have basically another audio person to help pin mics, to troubleshoot problems, and to mix when necessary. So altogether we had 3 contractors and then the 2 full-timers. So it was a 5-person crew. That's on a slider. So we had our two camera operators running the two single shots, one of our moderator and one that would rove between the panelists, and then the wide shot was on a slider. And essentially, most of the time it was locked down, but I would go in there occasionally and just slide it, at times, usually at the beginning, at the end of a session, whenever that's why I like being a floater is kind of nice. You can kind of try different things. It would have been nice to obviously have somebody on that the whole time, but I just would do it whenever I could. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The polling? Yeah, so that was part of Scribble Live, the live chat widget that we use. So you can ask questions in there, do polls, lots of more interactive features. The nice part was, I think I mentioned, you can pin certain things to the top of it. So you as the moderator can pin a poll at the top of it or an announcement. And the nice thing about that too is that if all of that gear failed and I lost the stream completely, I could pin an announcement, at least in the live chat, and say, we're experiencing technical difficulties, stay with us, because the last thing you want is maybe something happened and it could have happened in hour 1, right? And then everyone just bails. Even though it's a relatively quick fix, maybe I had to reboot something or something like that. So having another channel to communicate to the viewers other than just the live stream, I think is really important. Mm-hmm. Sure.
I'm kind of a strange question, but why did this make sense to you to do a whole day live online stream as opposed to the other way that you might be able to reach the same audience or with that content out there?
As opposed to the other, doing an in-person conference, or?
No, as opposed to you could have done, just made a bunch of videos and
Sure.
put them out. I mean, why did an on live,
Yeah.
make sense, or why did what value did it give you?
Yeah. I would say that we do the other way all the time, right? So we're producing 1,000 videos a year that kind of go into a lot of these topics. The culmination of all of that kind of thought leadership and expertise into this yearly event that's live makes sense for us because it's a huge value add for the viewers that are watching regularly already, but it also gives them the ability to interact in real time, right? So everyone wants to ask their question, everyone wants to be a part of the discussion, and so we found that brings a lot of value to the viewers. The other part too, and I talked about this last year in my presentation, but streaming live and recording live is a great way to generate content, right? So we had all of these experts and all of this gear, all these freelancers, all this stuff happening for 6-7 hours. But afterwards, we had then 6-7 hours worth of really valuable content that can live on for a lot longer, right? So those replays are important, and you can obviously replay the session in its entirety, or you can cut it up. And so the nice thing about a panel discussion when you cut it up is you could just take that one question, and if a few of them answered it, and maybe they went for 2 or 3 minutes, there's a great little segment that then you can feature as an on-demand piece later. And so there's a lot of value that comes out of it from that perspective as well. Sure.
How did you choose what bit rate to stream at? Did you use any analytics, typical customer bandwidth at home
Yeah.
versus what they experience at work, mobile device support, something like that?
Yeah, so that's obviously a very I don't know what the right word is, but that's an evolving area, right? There's a lot of schools of thought on what to do regarding that. I would have loved to have done this multi-bit rate stream, with 5-6 different renditions, whatever it might be. For this type of content though, it just wasn't really necessary, right? It looks great in HD, but it costs more to do that, first of all. And you then have to have the expertise to package that stream properly. The player needs to be a little bit more sophisticated, all of that. So to get to your question, what we did was we did a single rendition. It was about 550 kilobits per second, 640 by 360. And it looks good, not only in the player, it looks pretty good at full screen too. And it plays well on mobile. So the vendor that we use, VenStream, does do a transcode to HLS for mobile playback, but otherwise they're getting essentially the similar stream that we're outputting at 550 kilobits per second. And maybe this year we'll try the multi-bit rate, but for now I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, no, we've been standardizing similar like long-form events like this 6 to 8 hours, and we do 640, 360 as well. But
Yeah.
we're around 768 kilobits per second.
Okay.
That's based on just trial and error, looking at multiple events over the years.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Sure.
Good question about the cost for streaming out on Webcast for that many hours. Can you give us like a ballpark of what that would run?
Well, so Wirecast itself is just an application, right? So you can purchase that. I think it's like $4.99 from Telestream. The provider that we use, VenStream, they can package it in different packages depending on the number of hours that you're streaming, number of viewers, that sort of thing. Just to give you a ballpark, for this event, it was right around like $2,000, which when you compare that to some of the other providers out there is not too bad. I've worked with a lot of times you can choose your provider, and a lot of times you can't. For example, if you're a producer and you're working with a client that already has like an enterprise, whatever webcast provider that they work with, maybe you have to use them. For example, a few months ago we did that, and we used a much higher priced vendor that has a lot more like white glove sort of service, but it was literally 10, 15 times the cost. And I personally didn't see that much more value that was being added. So this is a solution that works well for us. Given that we have a lot of kind of in-house expertise to navigate the problems that can kind of come up, it's a little bit more self-service, not as white glove. If you want that kind of service, you have to pay for it. But in this case, we went with something that was a little bit more low cost. Mm-hmm. All right, great. Well, thanks so much for your time. Feel free to email or reach out, or I'll be here to answer any other questions. Appreciate it.